Higher, further, faster, baby.
That's right.
Welcome, Gothamites, to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City, and now the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Dr. Drea Letterman. Hello, Drea.
Hi, Brian. How are you?
Doing okay. I don't feel like I have a whole lot to say about the movie they're going to be talking about. I don't feel like it's my place to say...
Oh, is it my place?
Most of of what this movie is about.
I really hope it's not my place.
I think it is your place.
Okay.
We are talking about Captain Marvel, which is, I think, I don't know, pre-Eternals maybe. I would say that this was one of, if not the least liked Marvel movie by a lot of people. Sort of the at least when it first came out, it was panned by fans.
I think one of the problems, and we'll get into many of the problems, but one of the problems that stands out for me is that there was so much anticipation leading up to this film, that there was so much writing on it. And I think this is very common for releases, for cinematic releases that champion a female protagonist. And by this time, we've had Wonder Woman. I can't remember if we've had both Wonder Woman movies, but we've at least had the first one.
Yeah.
And so the buildup was present. The like I said, the anticipation, the love that surrounds this character. It may have been just nearly impossible to meet everyone's expectations, but it really just fell flat. In our rewatch of this, I just kept asking myself, I don't even know why this movie doesn't work.
Yeah. And you weren't just asking yourself. You were literally asking me on several occasions.
I just like, why isn't this working? Why isn't this working?
Yeah.
And I think it's a number of things that maybe you and I can formulate together and maybe land somewhere. But in the rewatch, I would say, look, if you're doing the full model, if you're watching all of the films and building a repertoire in your watch or rewatch around the Marvel Cinematic Universe, this is an important film to include. So don't skip it.
Mm-hmm. If I could narrow it down to one or two things that I feel like the movie doesn't succeed in doing, it's giving your main character a legitimate arc. She's got to start somewhere that's different than where she ends up. And unfortunately, and I don't think this is Brie Larson's fault, because I've seen Brie Larson do things on screen that I have enjoyed very much. And I think she's a good actress. I mean, she's won an Academy Award.
She's amazing.
But she is cardboard in this movie. And she is very pose centric. Like, there's a lot of, I mean, Marvel gets made fun of because of some of the posing done. You know, Black Widow gets made fun of in her own movie for being a poser.
I mean, but it's almost a parody. It almost feels like an absurd version where she's just constantly doing the one-liners, constantly posing, constantly
and
like
she's
giving it away, fourth wall.
And the posing isn't even an interesting pose. It's just like a 3/4. I'm going to stand stiff as a board with my fists clenched tight, and
yeah, it's
doing
sort of
it.
like a Galaxy Quest level of, you know, I'm fully aware of my character.
Yeah.
And I'm fully aware of the fandom, and I'm fully aware that I embody female empowerment, but you don't walk the walk. It actually lands flat. What's the second? So the first problem you have is the lack of arc. What's the second?
The second is they wanted to give her an adequate human proxy sidekick in giving her Nick Fury. And I think the problem with this is you're now reinventing Nick Fury by creating his quote unquote origin story. He is comic relief throughout most of this movie. And when has Nick Fury ever been comic relief? You know, we even find out that the scar, the famous scar and eye patch, is created adorably because of his love of a cat. You know, like you have now basically taken away the mystery. You've taken away the serious character, and you've now basically implied that the reason he is so serious is because of this event. And I just have a hard time with this being the Nick Fury origin story. That being said, I love Ben Mendelsohn as the Skrull leader. I think he was fantastic. He was also comic relief, which I think was important.
Yeah,
you had to find this villain to be endearing because it turns out he's not the villain, and so I very much appreciated that. I think the story works on certain levels. I think the story works on the particularly on the level of realizing that in a war there are two sides, and they both believe they're right. They're both fighting for different things, but also the same things. They're fighting. You're always going to be fighting for your way of life, your family, your friends, and in many cases, we are only fed the one side when we are on one side of that war.
Yeah. And
so when it's revealed that the Skrulls...
Wait. So can you... I was going to ask you to give us a little bit of history on the Kree and the Skrulls.
The Skrulls.
Okay. The Kree and the Skrulls... This film, it kind of puts those communities or pits those communities against each other. There's a little bit of history we're given. There's the aspect that involves Captain Marvel, which I think is accurate to the comics, where she is kind of brought into the Kree community. And maybe we need to back up a little and talk about Captain Marvel, just kind of set the origin for her.
Right.
So I knew about Captain Marvel mainly through, or I should put it, I know about Captain Marvel through the eyes of Kamala Khan. So in learning about Kamala Khan, this is Miss Marvel. This is the young Muslim American girl who becomes Miss Marvel in the comics. And Carol Danvers, who was Miss Marvel in the comics, becomes Captain Marvel. It's almost a, I don't know, I don't want to say a promotion, but
yes,
change in title. And so I know more about the Miss Marvel that is centered around the journey of Kamala Khan.
Which is getting her own...
Yes.
She's getting her own Disney Plus series.
Which is going to probably blow this film out of the water. But Captain Marvel, a.k.a. The Carol Danvers version, as I understand it, was a Kree man. Like the original Captain Marvel was a Kree dude.
Here's the thing. Not the original Captain Marvel.
Oh, no.
So it depends on how far you want to go back with the Captain Marvel name. But we're going to ignore the fact that Captain Marvel was also a DC character and all of that. We're gonna throw all that aside for now. In this particular incarnation of the history, Marvel was technically the 6th Captain Marvel, and Marvel, the Kree, who known as Captain Marvel, passes on the mantle of Captain Marvel to Carol Danvers. So it is a mantle that is passed on from basically generation to generation of Captain Marvels. And then the Miss Marvel mantle, yes, went to Kamala Khan afterward. So yeah, and that happened pretty recently, actually, in the grand scheme of things. I think, what was it? Carol Danvers became Captain Marvel in like 2012. When was it?
Yeah, it was within the last 10 years because Carol Danvers was Miss Marvel in the 70s. Throughout those decades.
Starting in the late 60s.
And this is why it's relevant, because as I recall, the very little I know about this character, Miss Marvel represented, again in the 70s and 80s, a female superhero who embodied the values of equality and empowerment among women, among women communities, and was like much like other superheroes, Peter Parker, DC's Clark Kent, like she ran women's magazine, like it was named, it wasn't a women's like it was called Women's Magazine, and it was like an alternate title or a within the publication company of the Daily Bugle. So this was meant to be a version of many of the superheroes that we or that readers came to know, but to give visibility and equality to women. And that's important. I think that's something that this film tries to showcase or highlight, but as we talked about, doesn't really succeed.
Yeah. So in the course of this movie, we are led to believe that there is a Kree Skrull war, which comes directly from the comics. And she, having no memory of her past before being taken in by the Kree, is fighting on the side of the Kree. She's definitely an elite warrior of some kind. This is one of the reasons why I'm not fully understanding the character, because she seems to be a trainee, but she's also sent in with an elite unit of like 5 other highly qualified Kree warriors.
Yeah, she's like in a SEAL team.
Yeah, but she's also like an intern, because like she'll go into training with her superior officer played by Jude Law, and he will constantly be trying to tell her, to sort of slap her nose and tell her, no, you got to do this, you got to do this, keep your emotions in check, keep your powers in check, you got to keep everything completely in control, which, by the way, is the point of this movie. It's
Yeah, talk about that. Like,
well, I'm not talking about it.
Well,
you talk about it.
I mean, what's there to say? There's so much potential there.
It's so in your face.
Yeah, and I look, the idea of let's talk about the gender of it all. Like the idea of women being told, keep your emotions in check, don't be overly dramatic, don't be overly emotional, use logic, use your rational sense. Don't be impulsive. I mean, it's really interesting, actually, and I see the double standard. And not just that, everywhere.
but the implication that Jude Law's character, the Kree, gave her powers and can take them away.
Well, does she know that?
That's the thing. That's what I'm saying. Is there's this retelling of history that the patriarchy has decided and has told her, you are only as powerful as you are because we have made you so, and we can take that away. So keep yourself in check. Don't ever come up against us. Don't ever go up against the patriarchy. Don't ever go up against Jude Law. And in reality, this is a power she's had for quite some time. And, so it's this constant, and sometimes you need this. Sometimes society needs this, right? They need to be beaten across the head with this idea and with this.
Well, I'm not gonna lie. When you see the training scene between Jude Law's character and Brie Larson, and he's lecturing her about her inability to keep her emotions in check. He's trying to demand that she override this like unnatural, or actually rather an instinctive situation inside her body. I kind of liked it. Like that pulled me in a little bit more.
In what way?
In that, like, she's got a weakness. Like, or they're trying to portray this as he's pointing out a weakness, or she has self-doubt. She has struggle. She's like, I relate to that. Okay, like, we're in this. Well, I get it.
Yeah, but you also relate to the bigger picture, which is if you continue to use these powers, you will be more powerful than me. And we don't want that. So we're trying to suppress them.
He is trying to center himself as having the power, the privilege, and authority, and he's continuously reestablishing that, whether it's actually true. So the idea that he can lose or have to share power is disruptive to him. He can't see that as a system that he wants to be a part of. He continues to want to perpetuate that. I'm understanding that Kree have gender, that as a male Kree, he sees himself as being the authority. And it's interesting because it's hard to tell in this film. It's much clearer in the next film she's in, but her power is just extraordinary. Her power is unmatched. Like, how would you describe, for someone who doesn't know Captain Marvel's superpower, what is that?
She has acquired her power through the engine that exploded on the big experimental jet that Marvel was creating.
Right. So she was exposed to a blast.
Yes.
Like, let's simplify it. She was exposed to a blast that
gave her powers.
Yeah. That she can fly, super energy, super cosmic energy that she can use to have super strength, to have flight, to have, I would say, to enhance her existing athletic capabilities.
Yeah, her endurance and her durability are certainly enhanced by this. Her strength is enhanced by this. And she basically has the ability to project, absorb energy.
Okay.
And convert, manipulate the energy. And by doing this, she has given herself the ability to fly. Like, she is manipulating all that energy around her, and she's using it to propel herself upward and forward, higher, faster, yada yada. Like, it's
okay.
It's a simple, and by the way, by trying to literally shackle her, they have tried to prevent her from meeting this full potential. They want her to be a subordinate to Yon-Rogg and to the greater Kree, because she's not Kree. So to the greater Kree cause. And in the comics, it is very much like this. The Kree have acquired technology and advancements from the Skrull, and they use this to basically go around the world, the universe, and, for lack of a better term, sort of conquer. They attack the Skrulls. The Skrulls then retaliate. The Skrulls are very much considered villains in the Marvel continuity, but it's mostly because of this Kree-Skrull war, right? So the Skrulls end up coming to Earth. They fight Captain Marvel on a regular basis. They do have the ability to transform themselves.
Yeah, the Skrull are innate shapeshifters.
Yes.
So they can will themselves to appear like any other form or any other species, which is common to all of them.
Yeah. In fact, my most recent, with the exception of these movies, obviously, my most recent interaction with a Skrull story, for the most part, was when I produced a DVD for Marvel's animated comics, and it was for Spider-Woman, and
they were the villains,
and the Skrulls are the villains in that. Well, the Skrulls and the government, and it's always.
Is it just me, or any kind of shapeshifter tends to be plotted as the villain?
How can you trust a shapeshifter?
Mystique kind of toes the line, but is often the villain.
Oh, I'm sorry. You are clearly not thinking of Morph.
Morph got kicked off of the X-Men in like the early season of the X-Men
in the pilot, and he died.
Oh, right.
He died.
I'm sorry to laugh.
He's the sacrificial lamb of the pilot, a character completely created for the animated series just to kill off in order to anger Wolverine and other people who were his friends.
Yeah, but aside from Morph, for the most part, shapeshifters, folks who can be fluid in their hybridity, who can be in-betweeners here or there, that's not seen as good. It's
the idea of being two-faced, literally. Like, just this idea of never knowing what to trust. Who are you?
Yeah,
really?
Deceitful.
And if you have the ability to adapt to be anything for anybody, we've sort of talked about this with Black Widow. How do I know that you are ever being genuine to me? Like, who are you?
What if the shape-shifting is a genuine experience?
What do you mean? It's a genuine experience?
Yeah, I mean, there's a Star Trek character. This is a little different, but the Deep Space Nine character.
Odo.
Oh, no. The Trill. The Trill?
Oh, well, but
they sort of move in between bodies.
They move between bodies, between hosts. They're symbiotes. They move.
So.
But the body's personality also dictates. Like you've got the memories of the previous incarnations of the character, but the body does.
It's like a blending.
They're symbiotes. So, but I see what you mean.
I feel like I brought up the Trill like 1,000 times on the show. Let me talk about the Trill. So, okay, let me back up a little bit.
Okay.
We know a little bit about the Kree. We know a little bit about the Skrull or the Skrulls, and we know a little bit about Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers.
Yeah.
So you brought up that she is portrayed a certain way, and I would agree that you see these flashbacks of this young girl throughout her life being rejected, bullied, lectured at, pushed down, and there's scene after scene where she faces these tensions, these messages of you're not good enough, you're not strong enough, you're not fast enough, you're not powerful enough. And the enough is often to the men or boys in her life, the brother figure, the father figure, the service members, the soldiers she's with, the guys.
And the alpha women,
Yeah, I thought that it was a little bit exaggerated, but kind of being told, you're never going to be as strong as us, and that bullying, which I know happens, but just seemed to be a little over the top.
And the idea is she's not disciplined enough. Like her personality is shining too much. She's just so cocky. She's got that sort of superior attitude, even though she's clearly the youngling in the group and whatever.
What is that though? That's what I was trying to figure out. That why don't I like this? I should like the story of a resilient young woman who overcomes these harsh messages, who actually breaks the kind of breaks the formula or the mold, so to speak. Like she kind of just defines herself. She's her own person, and that's enough. And it actually becomes empowering to her.
Well, the problem with and this is what I mean by the arc, is she's the exact same way from the first time we see her to the end. She's just more powerful in the end because she's decided not to hold back her superpowers. Right. But in the very beginning, she's still just as cocky and witty, and she's never grown into it. She doesn't. He even says at one point, I used to find her amusing, But
who's he?
Jan Rog says, like, after we've discovered that he's the bad guy and he sends the team out to kill her, she makes some cocky remark and he says, you know, I used to find her amusing, you know, where you could tell she was like a gnat to him. Probably very annoying. This attitude, this bullish attitude from this young girl under his wing, and tutelage. But now that he knows that she is more powerful, this is not amusing to him anymore. And now he finds the cockiness to be...
Well, he's threatened by her.
Threatening, yes. Yeah. Yes, but the problem is the character is the same throughout. Like, it's just in her level of willingness to use her powers. And there's never an earned character arc. And as a result, she is played very wooden throughout the entire movie. And I don't know if that's Brie or if it's the direction, or if it's because it'd be one thing if we saw Jan Rog do everything he could to push her down and for her to respond to it, but she never does. She's constantly going up against the grain, and you get the impression that that's just her natural instinct, that this is a woman who works and fights on instinct, which is fine. But we don't see her go anywhere because of it. And so she has no genuine character arc. And as a result, she is wooden from the very first time we see her to the very end. And it's just all about the poses in that really uncomfortable looking leather outfit.
And is it that, you know, one thing I do worry about is that fans and viewers, and I'm including us here, that one of the reasons we don't accept this portrayal is that we're carrying these lenses that have a lot to do with gender. And that's what I'm trying to unpack a little bit. Like, what are we used to seeing that we didn't get? Or what biases are we working through to actually get to like this character? So for instance, some of the things that came to my mind were like, man, I wish she did something more with her power, like do something more compassionate, like give, like, I don't know, be more
throughout the movie, or at any point during the movie.
I guess throughout the movie, but make it be about how she is, how she's, I guess, I don't know, compassionate or concerned about how other people are impacted by these things. And then I tell myself, but would I say that about a male character? Or am I just saying that about a female character? Because that's how that's what we're socialized to do.
Well, I don't think you're wrong in a degree. Like, we do see her once she unleashes the power and begins to lean on it heavily for that final fight and the aftermath of that. We do see her, she basically, and again, it's a very posy moment, and her character model in CG just looks like a video game character all the time. So it's also really hard not to be pulled out of the movie on that. But when she's up in space and the Skrulls are in the ship, and they look out the big window on the bridge, and they look out at her, and she poses there in front of them, and she's this brilliant rainbow of oranges and yellows and blues and just this wonderful these colors around her. In that moment, I think they even smile back at her, and like the little kid waves, and all this. Like, she does stand for something there using her powers. She then basically propels them into hyperspeed.
Yeah, I was like, I guess she can kind of like push them into warp speed.
Let me give you a push. She does become, and this is one of the reasons why she was a letdown for so many people, is she does become the most powerful character in the Marvel universe, basically. And, you know, there's this idea that Captain Marvel couldn't have been introduced as early as Infinity War because she could have defeated Thanos on her own. And you even see them desperately trying to figure out how not to use her in Endgame later. Which, by the way, her part for Endgame was shot before her part for the movie. So in Endgame, it's actually her character's a little worse because she's got nothing to work on. She's no character whatsoever. And because she had not found the character of Carol Danvers yet in her own movie. So yeah, I'm so disappointed by what could have been. But to be perfectly honest, if I had had my druthers, I almost would have gone in the same direction as the comics. I may have introduced a Marvel character, male or female, doesn't matter to me. I may have introduced a Marvel character who was a Captain Marvel, very powerful Kree character, and I might have killed them off and let Carol take the mantle from Ms. Marvel, a very competent agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., or someone, you know, similar to the way that she is in the comics, because that's the thing is for the decades that she was Ms. Marvel, she was an incredibly competent, very thorough. Like she was basically this sort of kick-ass, covert character, and here she's just a lady that doesn't remember anything about her history, and when she meets up with Rambo and her daughter, which, by the way, Monica Rambeau was a Captain Marvel. Like, Monica Rambeau was an earlier Captain Marvel.
Okay.
And they stole it. They took it away from her, right? They took this African American woman who was technically, I think, the second or third, but I think the second Captain Marvel in the 80s.
Well, so let me comment on a couple of things that are coming up for me. One is that I'm for some reason using the comparison of Steve Rogers. Only in that, here's where, like, how does a character like Steve Rogers work so well? You've got this kid who doesn't have a predisposition, right? Isn't holding on to some like super gene, and is gets to have this superpower because of some some different kind of science, but a cataclysmic event, right? And then you have Carol Danvers, who grew up very determined, very resilient young girl, but similarly bullied, sort of kept out, somewhat of an outcast. And I think what I want to see is more of Captain America, is more of Steve Rogers' humility in her. This sense of like, I know what it's like to be forgotten. I know what it's like to be in the margins. I know what it's like to be invisible, unseen, you know, and to feel like you want to do more. And that's something just so heartfelt about him. The other thing about him that I wanted to see more in her was this a nuance around patriotism. That here she is with this very American style suit, serving in these military roles and feeling that she's a participant in the defense of the country, and then dealing with some surprises, right? Gosh, the Skrull are actually refugees. They're not the enemy. You know, these turns that happen in the storytelling that I think could lend itself to moments where we see a little bit more of her psychology, her pathos. And
you don't think we got that on the bridge when she sees the family, where she suddenly says, "I'm so sorry," and she basically says, I didn't realize, I didn't know what we were doing." Because the moment she has the information, she instantly switches sides. She becomes their defender. rather than. But I see what you're saying. I mean, it's hard because throughout the movie, she's just basically a bounty hunter searching for Skrull and just beating them up on buses. You know, she'll just knock an old lady out because she can tell they're a Skrull.
Thankfully, we have another bus scene in a future film to completely eclipse this one. So.
Yeah, they took this fight scene and went, you know what, we can
my beer.
We can make this better.
I don't know. I mean, you can disagree with me, but I just felt like there's a way to make this kind of character you root for, but also follow along these patterns and nuances of personality development in that, like, I can't just follow what I'm told to do. I can't just, I can't just wear the suit and do the powerful thing because I'm supposed to do that. Mm-hmm. There's more to this that's about me and who I am. And I'm not connecting to her on that.
No, I don't disagree. She's very hard to connect to at all. I think the problem is the movie is written for the audience. And by that I mean,
but who?
So by that I mean, well, you. Well, what I mean is this. And I don't mean that as a slight, but what I mean is this. So a few years ago, I interviewed Peter Dinklage for a movie called Living in Oblivion. It was his very first film role, and it's him on a movie set, dressed in a blue tuxedo and top hat in a weird red room, very David Lynchian. It's supposed to be a dream sequence. And Steve Buscemi plays the director of the movie, and he's arguing with Peter Dinklage and saying, no, I want you to be weird. And Dinklage says, why does it have to be a dwarf? Who has, it's a dwarf, must be a dream sequence because it's weird. And when I interviewed Peter, he said it's literally everything he ever wanted to say in so many occasions in his life, where it's like, oh, because it's a dwarf, it's got to be weird. And we don't symbolize weirdness. And I get the feeling that this movie was written for all of the women in the audience to cheer and clap when Carol literally says all the things and does all the things that they've ever wanted to do to the male patriarchy.
So when you see when you see her fighting
I'm just a girl.
When she breaks out of the shackles and she's fighting, and the backdrop music is No Doubt's I'm Just a Girl.
Yeah.
Like, that fell flat too. It was like, oh God, this is cringeworthy.
Here's where I think it works. But I think, unfortunately, it comes way too late because you've already spent too much time with all the other stuff. Mm-hmm. It works really well when Jude Law is on the beach and he says, I'm so proud of you. You finally reached your full potential. Or have you? You still have never beaten me in hand-to-hand combat without using your powers.
Yeah.
And he drops his weapons and he says, come on, fight me, fight me. And really, before he can get anything out, there is no dramatic fight. She just blasts him with the powers because she knows, I don't need to prove myself to you. And she even says it, I've got nothing to prove.
Yeah.
She doesn't need to prove herself. I can beat you easily, and here's how I'm going to do it. And there's nothing you can do to stop me. And I feel like that is a genuine stand up and applaud moment, because you got a guy who realizes the only way he can win is to bring her back down to his level. Mm-hmm. And she doesn't even entertain the thought. It's just, no, I am so much more powerful than you, and I know it, and I'm going to use it. And it's a great moment, but it comes too late because you've not built to it. She's just been doing it all along.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, and I like that it's a rejection that his standards and principles are centered.
Yeah,
it's like a complete rejection of the whole system. Like, she centers herself and her value, her principles, her powers. Mm-hmm. and I would have liked to see more of that. But again, I feel like I'm incoherent about this because I simply still do not understand why this fell as flat for someone like me who wants to see more female superheroes as protagonists, as leads, as carrying a whole film. And let me just say, I also hate it when people use this film or other films as examples of why we shouldn't have female superheroes be in charge, but also as leads in films. But unfortunately, this just didn't
I am
hit the mark.
I am reminded of an interview that Kevin Feige did when he said the reason they cast Brie Larson was that she would be able to beautifully work the two different sides of Carol Danvers, the super powerful side and the humanity side. And I think my problem is I never saw the humanity.
Yeah.
Like there was never, even as she's learning all this stuff, the moments with the kid, who we then get to meet as a grown-up in WandaVision, the moments that she has with her, I feel like they keep trying to push this humanity. Like she likes the little girl. She doesn't remember the little girl. She doesn't even really remember anything that she's talking about. She's showing her photos and she kind of likes the pictures and stuff, but like there's not really a whole lot of human connection between her and Monica or her and the kid. But then she like lets the kid design her suit for her. And by the way, I'm trying to figure out why this capability even exists because after she shows up wearing different colors, Jan Rog even says like you're not even wearing the Kree colors. And I'm like, well, it's your suit. Like, can't you all do
you have
this?
The ability to alter. So what I hate the most about that scene too is that this young girl has had her jacket this whole time. Her what is it? It's
flight jacket.
This like flight jacket, right? And
she spilled ketchup on it though, so she's not been allowed to wear it.
Well, but she said we got the stain off. Like my mom and I got the stain off, and she's so proud to have this, what I would call like an artifact or an object that represents her relationship with like an auntie figure. And she gives it to Carol, and even in the second time I saw this, I'm like, oh, Carol gives it back to her. She doesn't. She puts it on and wears it and flies out into outer space.
Thanks.
And I'm just like, oh,
I didn't have a problem.
Who decided that?
I didn't have a problem with that. No, because it's her reconnecting to who she was.
But she never really does.
No, she doesn't. But it's her trying. Like it's her embracing Carol Danvers now.
Well, and the trauma of it all.
And she's got nothing else. Like that's literally the only remnant.
I guess. Well, where's she going to live? What's
in space. She's all powerful.
Okay. So the trauma of it all.
She's not paying rent.
The trauma of it all is that she had this memory lapse, this it's multiple year long fugue where her identity is, for the most part, completely Kree until she discovers this past. And I think that's a huge trope, having some kind of memory loss, having a part of your identity that you never even knew about. That's the humanity part. And so the writers decided, because I don't think this is in the comics, that she's basically been wiped of her humanity and she has to regain it. And I think that's where I have the most of my problems with around this character, is that it seems like the arc is supposed to be her reconnecting with her humanity, regaining a sense of who she was. And all it continued to do was double down on this narrative of resilience that didn't, for me, allow her to have moments of real struggle and loss and recovery. I guess it just seemed too easy.
Well, and it doesn't help that the only real flashbacks we see of her past also make her boring. Like they're all traumas. They're all like moments that she wasn't doing particularly well. Like this is the Steve Rogers part where she's really bad at certain aspects, and rather than encourage her, everyone around her just keeps her down. That informs that part of that character.
Yeah.
It's the only thing though we get. So as a result, with the exception of I think 2 flashbacks of her karaokeing, which simply means, oh, she has the ability to stand in the corner with a microphone and sing some songs with Maria, but that's it. Everything else we see is her being pushed down, with the exception of the one scene with Marvell, who she doesn't even remember. The memory that the scrolls are pulling out, with her saying she likes it better up in the sky. She feels like that's where she belongs. That's the view she likes. She likes seeing everything from a distance, and she likes having that power and that control. She doesn't get that here on the ground. And I get it but even in that scene, she's pretty cardboard against Annette Bening. And so, I mean, Annette Bening's all smiles and, hey, kid.
Yeah.
Just wait. You're going to be able to go up there one day. You're going to, but Bree is just giving this wooden performance of, I like it better up there in the sky. I like being able to look down at the people.
Well, you still like give me the right stuff, like passion, right?
And she picked it up. Oh my God. When she falls into the Blockbuster and she actually picks up the double VHS of the right stuff. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, God, I wish I was watching that movie. I wish I was watching that movie. 'Cause they're all characters in that movie.
Yeah.
They're all basically archetypes. And so, I think that's what disappoints me is, in the comics, when Carol Danvers became, Captain Marvel, Kelly Sue DeConnick said that her pitch was that she basically wanted Carol to be Chuck Yeager. And Chuck Yeager is famously the test pilot that broke the sound barrier. It's the very first test pilot to go beyond the speed of sound into Mach 1. And I don't get Chuck Yeager out of this character.
But I see that's maybe where they were going, because I see in her childhood and upbringing a little bit of recklessness, a little bit of risk taking,
1000%,
willing to just be in an endurance and an adrenaline mindset. I agree. Like that would have been, carry that thread a little bit more. Mm-hmm. I understand. Let's take it kind of back to where we started, which was this is a character. This is a person who continues to be told, you're too reckless, you're too emotional, you're too out of control, and you need to get your logical mind to supersede those urges. And I think if there's anything that we can pull from this film, it's this constant tension between our emotions and our rationality, the ability and sometimes the inability for us to differentiate between an emotional decision and a logical decision. Mm-hmm. And I think we get at least I get a lot of messages and social advice around how to come across, how to make decisions, how to find solutions, how to get out of a situation, how to have conversations, how to have difficult conversations, how to avoid conflict. All those things have a lot to do with balancing the emotional brain and the logical brain. And the reality of that dual paradigm is that it's never one or the other. Mm-hmm. That all of our all of our decision making is emotional because we're human beings. There's rare, like, I guess you'd have to be Data or C-3PO. Like, other than those types of characters, most human characters, and I would even include Vision here.
3PO though is a coward. Like he's like 3PO is not. I wouldn't call him emotionless.
K2SO.
Yeah.
is a better.
There you go.
Droid for that example.
Right.
So, man, we've got to talk about 3PO after the show. So, this concept of, you know, are you emotion driven or are you logically driven? And, you know, again, it's often a combination. It's often how our emotions and our rationality combine. And the skill here is not to not feel. Like, what I think what Carol's being told is like, push that aside, try to control it, try to get rid of it. And the opposite actually is true, which is build your emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is our ability to understand our own emotions, to understand those experiences within us, and to also be able to identify and comprehend emotional expressions in other people and how that all works together. So the concept instead that I'd rather put forth is, don't ignore your emotions. Like, understand where is that coming from? What's the history of the emotions coming up? How is it trying to drive your decisions? How is it becoming more present for you? Use interoception, which is your ability to be present in your body and understand what's going on in your body. And furthermore, use your, well, I hate to categorize, but use your logical sense. So use everything you know about your own understanding of your environment, your relational understanding, and in some cases, like your professional role and those discussions that happen there, and really kind of combine those intuitions and that intelligence in order to make more informed decisions. And the last thing I'd say is that there is a point that Jude Law is sort of making, in that there are going to be times when we shouldn't let our emotions drive our decisions or be really propelling us one way or another. And there's a gauge we can use for this. There's 3 different gauges, or there's 3 different parts of this gauge. The first one is what we feel in our body. So it's like a physiological gauge. Like if you're about to do something and you feel like your emotions might be overriding your whole system, consider, for instance, what you might be feeling in your body. So that's this kind of, you know, sense of, do you feel hot in your face? Do you feel like, are you out of breath? And these are going to be obvious things. Like, do you feel your heart racing? Tightness in your chest? Do you feel like, usually I might feel something in my stomach. And those are signs that your body's telling you that you might be overwhelmed, you might be anxious, you might be angry, frustrated, rageful. Those are the times to pause and calm the body first before you make any kinds of decisions. The second signal in the dashboard is our sense of certainty. So this is when, unfortunately, sometimes our world kind of becomes black and white, this or that, all or nothing. And if you have a sense of complete certainty about something, it could result in being closed off and not seeing the other alternatives. So if something is overly certain for you, you need to kind of take pause and better understand, like, what are the other alternatives? What are the other perspectives? Is there something I'm not seeing? Just in order to give complexity and nuance to this feeling of certainty, because really very few things are that certain. And then finally, the last little signal or light on this dashboard is urgency. Do you feel like something demands action now? It means you might be overlooking the value of analyzing something. I kind of do this in my job a lot because we have lots of crises. So this concept of like needing to act out of this sense of urgency and just take that direct action, explicit action, rather than take a moment to pause, look at all the information that you can analyze and evaluate. Are there other pieces to this I need to confirm or establish before we go and do something quite serious, something we can't undo, right? So those are the three kind of emotional signals. Beyond that, everything really is a combination of our emotional, moral, and logical senses, that we can't discount that moral sense of like, what's the right thing? There might be a rational thing or an emotional thing, but what's the right thing to do?
Right.
And that's where I bring Steve Rogers back into play. Like, he seems to act from all of these different senses. What is the logical, analytical, evaluated thing that I must do? What is the emotional, compassionate, meaningful? Like, what is the meaning of this that I need to consider? And what is the right thing to do? What does my moral compass tell me to do that will really have that impact on me, that taking this action, not signing the accords or signing the accords, whatever, is going to make the most sense. Mm-hmm. And I feel like even though this is meant to be Carol Danvers' story about the emotion versus the logic, it just never really took us there. It never took us on that journey. I was hoping to see that tension and that curiosity and that stress around that point, and I never got there with her.
Right. Yeah. Hopefully we'll have more fun next time. Although would fun be the right word to use for Endgame? Next time.
Wait, is Endgame next?
Next time, yeah, we're covering Endgame. It's a 3-hour movie.
So we'll do like a 2-parter?
No. We're gonna do it all in one because we got something else big coming the week after. But yeah, next time is Endgame, so we get to see it all, the culmination of everything we've seen up to this point, all come to a head. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about the fact that we're basically done with the entire Infinity Saga?
I have to say that this was easier, and I don't know if that's the right word, but this was just very natural. It just felt very natural. All these conversations, all these deep dives, these character profiles, like it seemed right. It just seemed natural.
Yeah.
It didn't seem like we had to, even with this episode where there really isn't much to work with.
We get to talk for an hour about how there's so little to work with.
Yeah.
And what we wish we had seen.
Yeah. So I'm surprised that we made it.
Yeah. Well, next time is going to be a big one. So I look forward to that conversation. Drea, until then, why don't you tell the folks where they can find you online?
You can find me on my website, drdreapsychology.com. You can also find me on social media, Twitter and Instagram, at Arkham Asylum Doc.
You can find me on Twitter. I am at bward028 or on Instagram at b_ward028. You can find us both on Twitter at Arkham Sessions and on Instagram at the Arkham Sessions. You can email us at arkhamsessions@gmail.com, or you can come find us on Facebook and all that fun stuff. Also, be sure to follow our family over at Fanbase Press. Check out their comics and their other podcasts. And until next time, I want to thank our patrons for making this possible. Eric O'Sullivan, Rachel Acevedo Hoffman, Zach Neal, Zachary Hunter, Dr. Girlfriend, Dr. Jerome Anderson, and J. Griffin Hughes. Also, my father, Carl Ward. Thank you guys so much. You can get your call out on the next episode of the Arkham Sessions by going to our Patreon and taking the $5 tier. And we are running out of coins. The 2020 challenge coin with Batman on one side saying he's doing the best with what he's been given, and us on the other side. You can get yours by coming to Patreon and joining our annual tier. Anything more than a total of $30 will get you one of those coins sent to you ASAP.
I do want to give a quick shout out to the awesome folks over at For All Nerds. You can find them on Twitter and Instagram at For All Nerds. This is the team that gives you Views from the 616, which is the show that I guested on where we talked about the psychology of Moon Knight and broke down all the characters up till episode 3. Go check it out. So again, For All Nerds and Views from the 616.
Nice. And that was a fun conversation.
Super fun.
So until next time, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Drea Letamendi.
And together we are
the Arkham Sessions.
I have nothing to prove to you.